Welcome to the Deep Dive.
All right, so get ready to dive deep into some ancient history. It just might shake up what you thought you knew about some biblical figures.
Oh, it's going to be good.
We're going way back, exploring the Book of Jasher,
Good.
chapter 7 specifically,
Right.
to trace some familiar lineages. You know, sometimes you learn something in school and it feels like that's the EE story.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, today we're exploring some alternate takes on those familiar names.
That's what makes Jasher so fascinating. It provides a different level of detail, a unique lens
Ooh, I like that. A unique lens.
through which to view some of those well-known narratives.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're talking about genealogies here, those family trees that go way, way back, starting with Noah
Right.
and his sons after the flood. I mean, everyone knows the story of Noah's Ark, right?
Precisely. Jasher starts by listing Noah's sons,
Yeah.
Japheth, Ham, and Shem. But then it goes a step further
Okay.
than just names. It gives us numbers for their descendants. Japheth alone had like 460 male descendants at that time.
See, that's a lot more than just saying, like, lots of descendants.
It is.
Right. 460 sons alone. I mean, think about all the family reunions.
I know, right?
Okay, so let's walk through these family lines. Japheth's sons are first. Is that right?
Yes. Japheth had about 14 sons, and some of those names might ring a bell. Gomer, Magog, Javan. They pop up in other biblical texts,
Yeah.
even in historical references,
Oh, interesting.
and it just shows how widespread their descendants became.
Whoa, so they really spread out. Okay, what about Ham? Ham's family tree leads to a figure who really shakes things up,
Yeah,
Nimrod. But before we get to him, what about Shem's line?
right?
He's an ancestor of Abraham, right?
He is indeed.
Yeah.
Shem's line is important because it leads to Abram, later known as Abraham.
Of course. Yeah.
To give you the SparkNotes version, it goes Shem, Arpachshad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, and several generations later.
A few begats in there.
Exactly. Few begats. Kara, who becomes a father of Abram.
Okay, so we're tracing this line through history, like solving a family tree puzzle. And it ultimately leads to Abraham. Okay. That sets the stage for some major events in biblical history.
Sure.
But let's get back to Nimrod. What makes the story in Jasher so interesting?
Oh, we learn about his origins.
Yeah.
He's the son of Cush,
Okay.
and it's specifically mentioned that Cush had him in his old age, kind of highlighting, the love and importance of this son for him.
The son of his old age. Okay. So Jasher introduces the set of garments
Yes.
with a remarkable history.
Uh-huh.
The garments of skin that God made for Adam and Eve
Yes.
after their expulsion from the garden.
That's right.
But
Hold on. Are you saying the clothes Adam and Eve wore play a part in Nimrod's story?
it's a detail unique to Jasher, and it raises some really intriguing questions. These garments were passed down through generations,
Okay.
from Adam and Eve to Enoch,
Wow.
then Methuselah, then Noah,
Yeah.
and finally they end up with Nimrod. Imagine the weight of history
Yeah.
carried in those garments. Oh, wow. Yeah. Passed down through, like, all these major figures.
Right.
They eventually land with Nimrod. Do you think this inheritance shaped his destiny? Was he burdened by the legacy of Adam and Eve's transgression?
It's a thought-provoking question. It really is. It's as if these garments, imbued with the weight of the first human's disobedience, become part of Nimrod's narrative. Now, according to Jasher, Ham took the garments from Noah
Okay.
and gave them to his son Cush. Cush then hid them away, eventually bestowing them upon his own son, Nimrod.
So these garments become kind of like a hidden heirloom, but what kind of impact did they have on Nimrod?
Well, Jasher states that when Nimrod put on these garments at the age of 20, he was imbued with incredible strength and might. It's almost as if the power of Adam and Eve was transferred to him.
Through the clothes.
Through the clothes,
Yeah, it changes everything.
Okay, so what did Nimrod do with this newfound strength and might? Did he use it for good?
He became a renowned hunter, constructing altars and offering sacrifices to God. His prowess extended to the battlefield, where he led his people to victory against their enemies. He was so successful that people began saying, like God did to Nimrod,
Wow.
invoking his name when they went into battle, hoping for similar triumphs.
So he's a legendary figure, almost like a superhero of his time. But I have a feeling there's more to this story. Does Nimrod's ambition lead him astray?
You're right. Jasher tells us that when Nimrod reached 40, his success culminated in him being crowned king. He built a city called Shinar, but then something shifts. He strays from righteousness turning towards the worship of idols fashioned from wood and stone.
Oh no, it sounds like that classic power corrupts scenario.
It does seem that way, yeah.
He goes from hero to, well, not so heroic.
Sadly, his son Mardin is described as even more wicked than Nimrod, and the proverb, "From the wicked goeth forth wickedness," arose from this, referencing Mardin's evil deeds.
What a dramatic turn of events. So where does Terah fit into all of this? Abraham's father, he's connected to Nimrod somehow, right?
He is. While Nimrod is establishing his kingdom and descending into wickedness, Terah, a descendant of Shem, is serving as a prince in Nimrod's army. Jasher highlights his high standing, respected by both the king and the people.
So we've got these two parallel storylines happening. Nimrod's rise and fall, and Terah's position within Nimrod's kingdom. What happens next?
Jasher tells us that Terah marries a woman named Amphilo, and they have a son.
Okay.
They name him Abram, specifically because of Terah's elevated status within the kingdom.
So Abram, the future Abraham, is born into this world shaped by Nimrod's legacy. Talk about being born into an interesting family dynamic.
Indeed. It sets the stage for a fascinating exploration of how these intertwined lineages will play out in the stories to come. It really does. It makes you wonder about the weight of history these figures carried. We've got Abram born to this world, where Nimrod's influence is just everywhere. Do you think their paths crossed?
Well, with two strong personalities like that, I would imagine some sort of clash was inevitable.
You're right. According to Jasher, they do. In Chapter 9, it describes a confrontation between Abram and Nimrod, stemming from Abram challenging idol worship.
Wow.
He advocated for worshiping the one true God, the God of his ancestors.
Talk about a bold move to challenge the king's beliefs, especially a king as powerful as Nimrod. What did this challenge look like? Was it a public debate? Or maybe like a private conversation?
Jasher describes it as this clash of ideologies, this fundamental disagreement about the nature of divinity. Nimrod tries to reason with Abram. He argues that the sun and moon, they're worthy of worship because they provide light, warmth to the earth.
So he's appealing to logic, things that are observable and tangible.
Exactly. But Abram counters. He says that it was God who created the sun and the moon, and therefore God is the ultimate power, the one deserving of worship.
That's a pretty powerful argument, but I can imagine Nimrod, with his power and ego, probably didn't take too kindly to being challenged, especially by someone younger and, well, seemingly less powerful.
You're right on the mark there. Jasher tells us that Nimrod, enraged by Abram's defiance, threatens to throw him into a fiery furnace.
A fiery furnace.
If he doesn't recant and bow down to the idols.
Wow. That escalated quickly. What a terrifying threat. So what did Abram do, faced with such danger?
He stood firm in his belief.
Yeah.
Refused to compromise.
Yeah.
Even in the face of death.
Wow. That takes incredible courage and conviction. His unwavering faith, it reminds me of the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Oh, yes. From the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
Great comparison. And just like that story, Jasher describes a miraculous event. When Abram is thrown into the furnace, God protected him, and he emerged unharmed.
Wow. Talk about divine intervention. Did seeing that miracle change Nimrod's mind at all?
Well, Jasher notes that Nimrod was astonished by Abram's survival, but doesn't say he had a change of heart, but it definitely shifted things in the kingdom. Abram emerged as this figure of immense spiritual strength.
Right, because he challenged the king and survived. Seemingly through divine intervention, even if it didn't change Nimrod's personal beliefs, Abram's survival must have been pretty shocking to everyone in the kingdom.
Absolutely.
Made people question things, you know?
Definitely.
Question Nimrod's authority, the power of the idols.
It really becomes a turning point in the narrative.
Yeah.
It sets the stage for Abram's departure from Shinar, his journey to Canaan.
Right, which is huge in biblical history. It's fascinating how these stories from Jasher just add so much depth to those familiar figures. It's like seeing them in a new light. And speaking of Nimrod, there's another famous story.
Yes.
The Tower of Babel. Does Jasher have anything to say about that?
It does. Jasher's account of the Tower of Babel is found in Chapter 9. It's got some really intriguing details. It describes how Nimrod convinced his people to build this city with a tower so high that it would reach the heavens. He said it was to protect them from another devastating flood.
Wait, but didn't God promise with the rainbow as a sign that he wouldn't destroy the world with a flood again?
You're picking up on something really important. Jasher hints that Nimrod's motives might have been a little more complex. His actions suggest this desire to assert control over nature, maybe even over God.
So it's not just about safety, it's about power.
Yeah.
And control.
Right. His ambition and pride are fueling this monumental undertaking.
A direct challenge to God's authority.
It certainly seems that way.
What happened? Did they actually finish the tower?
Well, according to Jasher, God saw what they were doing, and he decided to intervene. He confounded their language.
Oh, wow.
Created a multitude of tongues, so they couldn't understand each other.
That's how we got all the different languages.
Exactly.
I always wondered about that.
Jasher describes how this inability to communicate, it led to arguments, conflicts among the builders. The project, which had started as this symbol of unity and ambition, just dissolved into chaos. Construction was abandoned. And the tower, it stood as this stark reminder of the limits of human ambition, the consequences of defying divine will.
A story that resonates, across cultures, throughout history, really speaks to those dangers of hubris, the importance of acknowledging a power greater than ourselves.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale, reminding us that unchecked ambition, rejection of divine authority, well, it can lead to downfall and division.
We've delved into Nimrod's story, his rise to power, his descent into wickedness, his attempt to reach heaven. It's a fascinating and complex narrative, but there's so much more to uncover in the Book of Jasher, isn't there?
There is. Jasher provides this unique perspective on those familiar biblical stories, and it introduces some lesser-known tales that shed light on the early days of humanity after the flood. For example, there's an account of the origins of war.
The origins of war. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does Jasher have to say about how conflict first arose?
Believe it or not, it all starts with livestock.
Livestock. You're telling me that the first wars were fought over cows and sheep. That seems almost too simple.
Well, it might seem that way on the surface, but Jasher digs deeper. It highlights those underlying motivations that fueled these early conflicts: greed, ambition, the desire for possessions and power.
So are you saying that, the first wars were fought over grazing rights?
It might seem simplistic, but Jasher's saying that greed and ambition, those were the driving forces behind these early conflicts, a desire for more.
It's kind of amazing how those same things, they still fuel conflict today.
Sadly, you're right. But studying these texts can help us understand the roots of conflict. And maybe, just maybe, we can learn something from it.
Right. It's like holding up a mirror, seeing those patterns repeating over and over again. So does Jasher offer any solutions? Any ways they tried to prevent these conflicts back then?
It does. It describes how these wars, they weren't just about land or resources. There were ideological differences too. Like some groups were worshiping idols, while others, like Abram and his followers, advocated for one true God.
So even back then, religion played a role in conflict.
It seems so. These clashes, they added a whole other layer to the violence, made the conflicts even more difficult to resolve. Jasher really shows the complexity of early human societies, all those challenges they faced, trying to live together peacefully.
It's fascinating how these ancient texts show that human nature hasn't really changed much over time. But does Jasher offer any hope amidst all this conflict and strife?
Of course. Even in these stories of war and wickedness, there are individuals who stood up for what's right. They sought peace. They kept their faith alive. Those stories give us hope.
They do. Those are the ones that inspire us to believe in a better world. So it sounds like Jasher presents a pretty complex view of humanity, acknowledging both the darkness and the light.
Exactly. It's not a simple good versus evil story. It's more like a portrayal of human nature that struggled between our best and worst impulses.
That's deep.
And within that struggle, you find both destruction and redemption.
This deep dive into the Book of Jasher has been amazing. We explored these ancient lineages, met some fascinating figures, grappled with all these questions about power and ambition and faith. It really has been quite a journey.
It really has. Jasher adds so much depth to the stories we thought we knew, reminds us there are different perspectives, ways of interpreting the past, and those can actually shed light on our present.
It's like we've been given a whole new way of seeing things. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
I hope they'll keep exploring. Dive into those lesser-known texts. Look for those different perspectives. There's always something new to discover. And you never know, you might just unearth something that changes your whole understanding of the world.
That's inspiring. Thank you for guiding us through this exploration of Jasher. It's been truly eye-opening.
It's been my pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.